A peacock displaying, but why should this member of the pheasant family have evolved such an elaborate tail or train? Darwin puzzled on the problem because he thought the existence of features such as these trains did not support his theory of evolution by natural selection. He worried that possession of an elaborate feature could be a disadvantage to the individual that possessed it, because it is an obvious encumbrance in the face of predation. Look at this, sheltering under the canopy of an ancient banyan tree, an obvious predator. India is the home of the largest population of tigers in the world, and also has over 2,000 endemic species of bird, but none so striking as India's national bird, the peacock. Peacocks are often found in the long reeds that border lakes. Here they are vulnerable to being stalked by predators. A peacock or peahen often provides the first kill for a tiger. As the tigers pounce, the only possible escape is flight, but the takeoff of these heavy birds in the long reeds is awkward, and they don't always make it. Here is a photograph of one that didn't. An artist's reconstruction picks out the dead peacock. The tiger plucks out the feathers before eating the few kilos of meat this bird provides. Evidence of previous kills can often be found. Marks on the soil where the dead bird has been dragged. Scattered plumage where the predator has removed feathers from the bird. And the carcass. Often the site of such kills is a waterhole. Here is a dried up one. The peacock might have been displaying and been caught unawares from behind. The train is heavy and long. It can be up to nearly 1.5 meters, making escape at close quarters very difficult, the possible cause of many peacocks' downfall. Darwin was right to be concerned. In the face of predators, the peacock would have been better off without a train. Clearly, it would only have been selected if there were adaptive advantages associated with this somewhat costly feature. So what are they? The peacock's train is a classic secondary sexual characteristic. Here is a 2-year-old male displaying without any train. The upper tail coverts, of which the train consists, do not develop until the male is in his 3rd year. Therefore, it is likely to have evolved through sexual selection, either because of its importance in male-male competition for mates, or because it's attractive to females. How could it be important in male-male competition? It could act as a status signal, or more generally indicate to a competitor the cost of becoming involved in a contest. And males which possess the more elaborate trains are likely to be more successful in contests for females. Here, a fight has broken out, and the dominant status of the winning male is obvious. The idea is that he should have the bigger tail and be more successful in winning a mate. But the alternative proposal is that mating has nothing to do with competition between males at all. This theory suggests that females prefer mates which have elaborate trains, either because they indicate something special about the male, or the female's choice may be arbitrary, purely a whim. Both these alternative explanations predict that any variation in male mating success can be accounted for by variation in train morphology. So our first task was to observe male mating behaviour. The original study was carried out at Whipsnade Zoo, where there is a feral population of approximately 200 free-ranging peafowl. Birds are caught and marked with engraved leg rings, and at the same time as many measurements as possible are taken. Here I am measuring leg length, wing length,
Okay, 16.2.
spur length, tail length, and head length, among many other parameters measured as well. Once the spring started and the males had established their display sites, we concentrated our efforts on observation. At Whipsnade, the peacocks form a lek, just as they do in the wild. A lek is a site containing several males displaying in close proximity, which females visit for the purposes of mating. So let's look at the features of a lek site in a tiger reserve in India. The vegetation is particularly lush. These are date palms around waterholes. Such sites attract a wide range of visitors because they can be relied on to provide water when other sources dry up. Not surprisingly, peafowl also cluster around waterholes and occupy them early in the morning and evening. During the hotter part of the day, the waterhole is swamped by monkeys. But by then, the peafowl have moved away to seek shade under a bush or a tree. Even so, they pant in an effort to get rid of excess heat. Temperatures here reach well over 40 degrees C. Observation over a number of days soon confirmed that a lek had been established here. The same males returned to their same small sites every day. On the approach of females, the full-trained males display. On this site, there were 12 males displaying continuously, the closest being about 4 metres apart and the furthest away being about 50 metres from the waterhole. This is the lek a few weeks before the mating season, occupied at sunrise by the males who have established territories and awaiting the females who typically visit a few hours after dawn. Females aren't the only visitors. Predators make use of the site too, both to drink and to catch an appetizing meal. But for the peacock, it's a costly procedure to get mates by displaying. The waterhole lek may be a good place to get mates, but it's a bad place because it puts males at risk from predation. At Whipsnade, of course, the peafowl have no need to fear predators, but apart from this obvious difference, there are many similarities with the leks in India. On many occasions, the males display in hollows, while others choose spots in front of bushes or sheds. Maybe because in India, a hollow accumulates water and provides a site where the displaying male can intercept females on their way to drink. During the breeding season, 2 kinds of male are to be found on the lek site. These are, firstly, displaying males, some of which were successful in mating and occupied permanent display sites. And secondly, floaters, males that do not display but just interfere with the mating attempts of their more successful counterparts. Floating males were never seen to achieve copulations. In the wild at night, peafowl seek the safety of trees and roost. Just after dawn, they fly down and make for the lek sites. Similarly, at Whipsnade, they roost in trees and fly down very early in the morning to occupy their display sites. If there are no females present, the males start calling together like this. The call is the characteristic kiao call, which most of you have probably heard. As soon as a female is in sight, the males stop calling and start displaying. If a female approaches close to a male will turn away from her, presenting a side view. If the female then walks around to the front of the male, he will turn towards her and shiver his train. The shivering of the train makes quite a loud noise and sounds a bit like a porcupine rattling its quills. He sometimes does this several times before attempting to mate with her. When he does attempt to mate, he quickly lowers his train and dashes around after her. As he does this, he makes a characteristic hooting call. We call attempted matings like this hoot dashes. Here is another hoot dash. The call he makes is distinctive, and it makes it very easy for us to record all attempted matings. Whether or not a male succeeds in copulating with a female depends entirely on whether the female stops and squats. Then the male lowers his train, bites the female's neck to hold on, and mates with her, all within a few seconds. But as we've seen, not all hoot dashes result in mating. In the spring of 1988, we saw about 300 hoot dashes, but only 33 copulations. Of 5 leks established at Whipsnade, one site in Flint Pit Paddock had 10 displaying males. Their exact positions are shown on this map. A histogram shows how the copulations were divided amongst the 10 males occupying the Flint Pit site. 2 males were not seen to copulate with any females, whereas our most successful male mated with 8 different females. Some males mated with the same female more than once, so we are expressing mating success in terms of the number of different mates a male obtained. In the wild, copulation is very seldom seen, perhaps because the event can take place in a hollow and is hardly visible. Not surprisingly, the secret of the peahen's conception is the subject of legends in India. One story is that conception is achieved by the female pecking up the male's tears. He is supposed to be crying at the sight of his ugly feet. Now, back to our original question. How does the peacock's train relate to his success, or otherwise, at mating? Well, there is considerable variation between males in the length of their trains. So, does mating ability correlate with train length? The mature male grows a new train every year, and it reaches its full length just before the mating season, which is very short and is mostly over within 3 to 4 weeks. After this time, the peacock molts and the decorative train feathers can be found in abundance. Here are measurements of the train lengths of Whipsnade peacocks. This growth curve is very similar to the annual cycle for peacocks' trains in India, except here peafowl mate a few weeks later than in England, at the start of the monsoon. Unfortunately, it's difficult to capture all the males at the same time to measure their train lengths. However, we can photograph the males and measure their trains in the photographs by using calipers, which record the extension of the lens and thus the distance of the subject. Also, we can count the number of eye spots on the train in the photographs and use this as a measure of train elaboration. If we plot a graph of the number of mates against eye spot number, and we use statistical analysis, we find that a lot of the variation in mating success is explained by variation in eye spot number. This supports our initial supposition that a male's mating success is dependent upon train morphology. But why? Let's go back to the ideas introduced earlier. If male-male competition is important, it can be predicted that, firstly, the train is used in aggressive interactions. Secondly, high-status males, those that win in aggressive interactions, should have more elaborate trains. And lastly, high-status males should gain more matings. The first of these predictions certainly fits with our observations. Here you can see a male threatening an intruder with a raised train. It's quite interesting that when the male raises his train to a competitor, he does not shiver it. This means that the arrangement of the eye spots is not uniform at all. The whole effect is rather raggy looking compared with the exotic look of the courting peacocks. Subordinate floating males rarely display and will quickly lower their trains at the approach of a dominant, and it is very difficult for these males to establish permanent display sites. Occasionally, parallel walks will develop between neighbouring males, but only rarely do such interactions between males end in fights. When they do, males try to strike at each other with their spurs, but generally peacocks are reluctant to go so far because their trains can become damaged during fighting. Once males have established their display sites, they are dominant over all other males that try to intrude. So it is difficult to record the relative status of displaying males. However, it may be that lower status displaying males suffer more interference from intruders. To test this, we recorded the amount of interference that a given male is subjected to whilst trying to mate. The interference is caused by floating males, who follow females and try to interrupt the mating attempts of displaying males. All second-year males are floaters, but some floaters are older and have developed trains. They are all attracted by the hoop dash, and they can come between the displaying male and the female. They can even knock the mounted male from the back of the female. However, without getting too involved in the complexity of the analysis, the conclusion is that amongst displaying males there is no correlation between the amount of sexual interference, which could indicate male status, and male mating success. So competition between males is unlikely to be the significant factor in explaining which of the displaying males gets most matings. Now let's move away from male-male competition and consider the alternative hypothesis, female choice. If female choice is important in explaining the relationship between mating success and train elaboration, then we would expect, firstly, that females should choose particular males and reject others, and secondly, females should choose to mate with males that have the most elaborate trains. It's fairly clear that peahens are choosy when it comes to mating. For a start, when females visit a lek, they never mate with the first male they come to. This chart depicts the sequence of visits by given females, 1 to 11, to males, A to G, before copulating. For example, female 4 visited 5 different males, and the last 7 times before finally copulating with him on the 8th visit. But what is special about the males the females mate with? If we compare the eye spot number of the male chosen with that of the males rejected, we find that in 10 out of the 11 sequences, the male chosen had the highest eye spot number of those visited. And in the exceptional case, the difference in eye spots was only 1. So on the basis of this evidence, it appears that the degree of train elaboration is important to females. Why do females prefer particular males? Have they developed an arbitrary preference for long-trained males, which by a runaway selection process has resulted in the elaborate morphology? Or do females gain from choice? That a female may stand to gain something from her choice of mate is indicated by two interesting observations. First, our study has shown that half the females mate with more than one male. Females are more likely to remate if they first mated with non-preferred males, and that when they remate, they are more likely to mate with a more successful male. If the act of mating carries costs, these observations suggest that a female's choice of mate is important and not arbitrary. Secondly, we observe that some females of high dominance status will sit down and repeatedly court preferred males, who they have already mated with. They are more likely to repeatedly mate with preferred males when other females are present, and they can aggressively guard him, preventing access by other females. Again, a female wouldn't indulge in this behaviour unless she had something to gain from choosing a particular male and wanted to prevent other females from gaining the same. Of all the features that females could use in choosing their mates, such as core rate or position of a male within the lek, we know it is only eye spot number and the closely associated train length which correlates with male mating success. In evolutionary terms, the costs are high. The larger the train, the more an encumbrance it is in the face of predation. After all, it weighs nearly a kilo, which is almost 20% of the peacock's body weight. So what do these elaborate trains indicate? We do not know, but here are a few possibilities. A large train could indicate that a male is in good condition, or of high status, perhaps that he is parasite-free, or, lastly, that the male has survived to an old age. It may be that only the best males in every sense can afford to carry these trains. If this is the case, then it would be desirable for a female to pass the genes of such a male onto her offspring. Trying to narrow down these possibilities is a clear priority for our future research. What factors correlate best with train morphology? And how does mating with a particular male affect the survival of a female's offspring? If we are really to understand exactly what it is that a peahen looks for in her mate, these are the questions we must now answer.